Jurors at the Raj Rajaratnam insider trading trial have now heard from one of his former employees, and the testimony was stunning. Adam Smith testified that to get the edge in the competitive hedge fund world, he relied on inside information. Now, if you're defense lawyer John Dowd, how on earth do you beat this back? We're going to try and find out with Doug Burns. Our friend here is back. He's a former federal prosecutor who now has his own private practice. Put yourself, Doug, in the shoes of John Dowd. How on earth do you challenge testimony like that the court heard from Adam Smith, bolstered by the wiretap conversations they heard a couple of weeks ago from Adam Smith?
Well, number one, it's very tough, and number two, he said sort of a quotable quote that's going to start resonating. In other words, you know, getting legitimate research is like studying for a test. I'm not getting the exact phrase. Getting the number, meaning specific earnings reports before they're public, is like cheating. He also went on to say, I knew the answer ahead of time. So it's very, very hard. I think one answer to your question is that apparently he kept doing insider trading after he left Galleon at another entity. So that's an area of cross-examination that I would delve into as impacting on his credibility.
Impacting on his credit, but does it impact on his credibility?
I think it does a little bit, in the sense that, oh my God, I mean, you know, you worked at entity number one, you continue doing it. But the fact of the matter is that the prosecution always counters, it behooves me to say, with, you know, of course he's involved in this. We selected him because he was involved in a crime with the defendant, okay? It would have been much nicer to call a first-grade librarian to tell you about this, but she's not going to be involved in this, okay? No, and I see you're laughing. That's the typical prosecutorial argument that is made. We take our witnesses where we find them, in the middle of a crime, right, and he did it with him. And it is actually pretty convincing. But if you're Dowd, again, you poke around the edges of, you're trying to get the lower sentence, you're trying to help yourself, etc. But it's so interesting because the credibility issues are all over the place. I mean, this is a man who graduated from Harvard and Harvard Business. That's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, wow, that's great. On the other hand, it's horrible.
Don't jurors get this, though? Look, if you're going to try and convict an alleged criminal who had accomplices, right, in an alleged crime, they're criminals too.
No, very well put. And the argument is at the core of criminal law. Ladies and gentlemen, we use criminal A to convict criminal B. And by the way, you can use a little reverse psychology. You may find that distasteful, ladies and gentlemen, that we call somebody who's involved in criminality. But again, the reality is we find them where they are. They're involved in a crime, and that's why we use them. And ladies and gentlemen, on this notion of they're lying to save themselves, the plea agreement says if they lie, we rip it up.
Are you surprised that the prosecution, at this point in the trial, we're already into the fourth week, is still able to pull out testimony this strong, evidence this strong against Rajaratnam, given that we've already heard from some of the star witnesses like Anil Kumar?
That's a very good point, Eric. I mean, you know, it's just piling on more and more. The reality is, you know, if you have one witness, okay, maybe it's somewhat of a horse race as to whether or not a jury's going to believe it. This is like a mathematical algebra discussion. 2 is that much stronger. 3, 4, 5, etc. And the government is just calmly and in a business-like manner coming forth with more and more and more, as you said.
One of the points that we've raised, and in fact you have been on this point before, criticism of the strategy that the prosecutors have taken. Does this sort of get them back on track, in your opinion?
No, I think it does, yeah. You know, during the trial earlier, it seemed as though they were playing tapes that they didn't necessarily need. Sometimes that's viewed as an overkill syndrome and so on and so forth. But I think they are kind of streamlining back on track. Don't forget, Adam Smith, ironically named after a famous economist, which is neither here nor there. But the fact is, Adam Smith worked at Galleon. So another advantage is it's good to give jurors the view. Here's a guy who worked right there. Here's the day-to-day, the way it worked right there. So it is helpful in terms of putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Right. In the case of this Adam Smith, not exactly how we'd like to build the wealth of nations, right? All right. Doug, thanks very much. Right. Doug Burns, a former federal prosecutor, helping us analyze the Raj Rajaratnam insider trading case.